Okay, our next guest on the Adam Thompson Show is Niger Innis. He serves as the national spokesman for the Congress of Racial Equality, known as CORE, and he's also one of the chief strategists for the Tea Party, and you can visit them at theteaparty.net. But if you want to find out more about Niger, you can go to his website at www.nigerinnis.com. This is going to be a lively discussion and debate, folks, because there's so much going on in Congress, in the White House right now, and no one better to discuss it and tell us their point of views on it than Mr. Innis. Welcome to the show, Niger. Great to have you on.
It's my pleasure to be on with you.
Okay, so I want to cut right to the chase. You know, there's so much going on right now in Washington, and I don't remember a time period in history in the last several decades when the overall ratings and approval of the people that we have serving for us, both in Congress and the White House, has been at such dramatic lows. I mean, on one of my recent shows, I even brought out that, you know, who do you think has a higher approval rating, hemorrhoids or rats or congressmen? And hemorrhoids and rats actually outscored congressmen. So it doesn't get worse than that. And it's all really been sparked by what's been going on with the shutdown. So what's your take on the shutdown? Let's start with that.
Well, two things. Number one, I don't believe that this disapproval of Congress existed just because of the shutdown, and that, you know, people were in love with Congress before the so-called shutdown. And first of all, let's be factual here. The percentage of the federal government that was actually shut down was less than 20% of the federal government. And, you know, people talk about how $24 billion lost revenue during that period was crazy and insane. You know, well, if $24 billion in lost revenue is crazy and insane, how about 17 trillion? That's trillion with a T, dollars. How crazy is that? And I would argue with you that it is, you belong in an insane asylum. Because this is a tax on our children. It is a tax on, frankly, our grandchildren, because it's probably going to take that long for us to dig ourselves out of this mess. And that's the real crisis. I mean, the crisis of and look, I feel for anybody that is working in the government or that may have a contract with the federal government. But the reality is our founding fathers had a much more limited vision for the kinds of things our federal government would be engaged in. And, you know, we do need to have dramatic moments of pause to have a discussion and really real debate about to what degree all of these activities of the federal government are valid and help move forward the American enterprise, the American people, and the American economy. And I think that's a legitimate debate to have. It is a must debate. Business as usual in Washington, D.C. must come to an end. And consequently, when please, I'm sorry, go ahead, you're second one?
No, I was going to say, I can't agree with you more, and I've been saying on this show that I think how government is run in D.C. is a complete debacle. That I agree with. I don't know if I agree with the other points you're making. I'll get to that in a minute. But I think this really two-party controlled system of Democrats and Republicans, that's just not getting the job done, and other points of view and other, you know, ideas are being shut out. I mean, it's even hard to get on the debate stage unless you're in one of those parties to bring out another point of view. But I will say this. Your mention of the deficit with the 16 and 17 trillion dollars that's just hovering over everyone's head is as bad as it gets, and it could get worse if we don't make changes soon. But I disagree with you when you say that the $24 billion that's lost from the shutdown isn't that really a big deal, because that just makes the numbers go higher and higher. I think the shutdown is more than just the $24 billion was lost. It's also a reflection of a loss in confidence of our government. I think what really was bad about the shutdown is that American people are watching this, and they're seeing that elected officials who are there to do a job can't get the job done. They can't just sit down and explore things and discuss points of view and get it done. Now, I want to tell you, Niger, I think a big part of it is a lot of people were saying maybe the Republicans and the Democrats, as much as a debacle as it was, would have come to work things out, but then the Tea Party stepped in and threw a monkey wrench in it. How do you respond to the people that say it was really the Tea Party that really sparked this shutdown?
Yeah, that is definitely the dominant narrative of the establishment media and maybe others as well. I just don't buy it, okay? The fact, you see, it makes you wonder what the real problem is. Is the real problem that, oh my goodness, we need to have politicians inside the Beltway who go to cocktail parties together, who have shared lobbyists that lobby them to get things that they want in legislation, okay, that these folk, okay, that often are in incestuous relationships, okay, the kinds of incestuous relationships that block out those different points of view and voices that you want on the debate stage. What the real crisis in the United States of America is today is that these folk inside the Beltway just don't get along well enough and work well enough together. Now, I can argue, I can say, and I can acknowledge that that's a problem, okay? Sure, okay? And by the way, it's a problem that the Founding Fathers kind of wanted. They kind of wanted government gridlock. They kind of wanted checks and balances. They kind of wanted to make sure that to ram things through government would be difficult to do, that you would have a divided legislature, that you would have a legislature at loggerheads with the executive branch, and then you would also have a judicial branch that could maybe put a check on both the legislature and the executive branch. You know, gridlock is in our Constitution. That is the way our Founding Fathers wanted it. They did certain things.
Yeah, but Niger, it has to be to the point where you're able to accomplish things. I mean, I'm all for checks and balances that keeps things clean and keeps it honest. But you're sounding like a politician to me now, Niger. You're sounding like the person who's running for office rather than the guy giving the behind-the-scenes strategy. Because, listen, you know, we also know what happened with Ted Cruz. Hey, let's focus on Ted Cruz for a minute. Ted Cruz did a huge filibuster. Ted Cruz did a filibuster for 21 hours and then ended up voting yes to the proposition that he tried to filibuster. Does that really make any sense to you?
Well, I tell you this much. Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Mike Lee, Rand Paul all raised concerns about Obamacare. They waved the red flag. Ted Cruz waved it harder and longer than any of them, okay? And let me tell you, I didn't necessarily agree with the strategy, okay? But the facts are the facts at this point. Those guys waved the red flag on Obamacare, and every single thing that those guys said, including Ted Cruz and his filibuster, said about Obamacare and warning the American people and doing everything they're doing, oh my God, what a politician is supposed to do. They say they're going to do something, running for office, and then they actually follow through and do it for their constituents. Everything has come to fruition.
But that's not necessarily true what you're saying, Niger. He filibustered, and then at the end of the day, he ended up voting yes. It's like saying, you know, I don't want ice cream, I don't want ice cream, and listen to me, I'll say it again, I don't want ice cream. Okay, so what do you want for dessert? Give me a bowl of vanilla. It sounds like an Abbott and Costello skit almost, but that's basically...
No, I don't...
And at the end of the day, when they finally did come to some terms, you know, even the Republican side said, you know, in so many words, maybe it wasn't directly said, but they pretty much got the point out there that, listen, it pretty much could have got resolved, but we had dissension within our own ranks, meaning Tea Party members, who basically, you know, put a roadblock up and prevented things from getting done.
When they say it could have gotten resolved, what does that mean exactly? Meaning that we could raise the debt ceiling again, okay, increase the debt that the American people, your children, my children, grandchildren are going to have, okay? Is that resolution? Because again, we have to ask ourselves this question over and over and over again. Is the problem of Washington, D.C. that politicians along with the bureaucratic class, the permanent bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., the lobbyists in Washington, D.C., who spend millions of dollars to make sure that their industries are protected, that they get Obamacare waivers. Is that the problem, that these things don't get along enough? Or is the problem the incredible de facto tax that is on the American economy and on the American people? And I would argue it's the latter, not the former.
Well, I agree that we got to change things in how the economy is running, how people are taxed, and I agree with those issues. But I think there is a bigger problem that I think our image in the world, how people from the outside looking in. I mean, if you're looking on the economic state of America right now, there's not a foreign country that says, is the dollar going to collapse? Or is the United States as big and powerful as it is next to Greece? I mean, do you ever see that happen? Do you think it's possible that we can have an economic collapse and even have hyperinflation? I mean, do you think that's a possibility?
I'll tell you what. Certainly the federal government felt that it was we should very much be like Greece, because they were entertaining the hiring of a security firm to the tune of $80 million to protect government installations when they thought that there would have to be a minor adjustment of several dollars in food stamps allocation every month in New York State. So obviously there's some folk in the federal government who wanted to hire an outside security firm against fellow Americans and to protect government installations to the tune of $80 million. So something is terribly wrong with what we're doing and what's going on in Washington, D.C. And I'm saying to you, it ain't because politicians aren't getting along. That's not the crisis. The crisis is a deadly fiscal crisis. We are on the slow march to Greece. Yes, we are on the slow march to being a Western European-style socialist state. And while Western Europe actually they can't afford to do it, but they've been allowed to create a fantasy that they can afford to do it because they live under Pax Americana, the peace of America, the peace of our oceans, the peace against terrorism, and these types of things that the United States of America and our military has provided to the world over the last 40 or 50 years. And so they had the luxury of experimenting with this quaint, big government socialist state that many of them had. But even they, with that benefit, even with that luxury, even they are paying the pauper. The fact of the matter is that nothing in life is free, and you pay for it at one point or another. And the Greeks are realizing that now, and the other Western European economies are realizing that now, and the American people are being forced to deal with that because of the irresponsible, reckless spending that's going on in Washington, D.C. And it's not just Democrats under Obama. It started under Bush.
So, Niger, do you think it's possible that with all that's going on, do you think that, if we did suffer some kind of economic collapse, that the government would consider some type of form of martial law?
Well, I'll put it to you this way, my friend, and Adam, this concerns me a great deal when I discovered this. There's a Department of Federal Government, I forget exactly which one it is, but it's federal government that is concerned about government installations in New York State being injured by fellow Americans, by the American people, so much because of adjustments in food stamps, so much so that they were entertaining, I don't know if they followed through with this or not, but they were entertaining buying a security firm, a private firm, and spending $80 million, not to protect citizens, not to protect individuals whose lives might be hurt or endangered, but government installations. So yeah, I'm a little bit concerned. And look, I don't hear the flash helicopters in the background or anything like that. I'm not one of those types of guys, all right? But I do know this. There is something called human nature. And as Lord Atkins once said, many moons ago, power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, I'm not saying that the federal government has absolute power, but I am saying for certain that if you mark the over 200 years that we have been a country, from our founding to today, there has been an increase of government, the federal government, in our lives. Okay, now in some cases, it's worked out for the better. Obviously, in the case of civil rights, there was such a dramatic crisis within our country in terms of constitutional protections that were being trampled over from fellow Americans by one set of American citizens against another set of American citizens, that a super constitutional effort needed to be made to guarantee those constitutional rights. So I'm not saying that the excesses of the federal government or the growth of the federal government has always been bad, but in general, the founders of our great country and the oldest, vibrant Constitution in the history of mankind, our founders were very apprehensive about the growth of government and government interfering too much into the lives of our civic culture and our
let's take it a step further, Niger. Let's take it a step further. I mean, I'm pretty outraged, and I've said on many of my shows in the past about all the NSA spying. I mean, now emails are being, reviewed. Cell phones are listened to. GPS systems are following us everywhere we go. Even now in your car, if you have a quick lane pass, that monitors where you go. I mean, you have to be equally outraged over all the intrusions on individual rights and private protections.
I'm very apprehensive, and that's why I said I made a distinction between Senator Cruz's filibuster, which I think, quite frankly, enlightened a lot of people about the misgivings of Obamacare in a very dramatic way. But it ultimately did not work, okay? I contrast that with Rand Paul's filibuster, where he forced the Justice Department to clearly state in writing, that drones would not be used on American citizens in a particular circumstance. And that was a very important victory on his part on behalf of the American people. Look, I was in New York City on September 11th. My offices were less than a mile away from Ground Zero. We were cordoned off in the security zone, and unless you had verification that you could enter and you had a job that required you to be there, you could not enter the security zone after 9/11. And we were in that security zone, and for months after 9/11, I had terrible migraine headaches. So 9/11 was very personal to me and had a dramatic impact on my life. So I understand the actions that the Bush administration and Congress made in 2001. I understand the war on terror is a very serious war, okay, and that there are people out there that would want to undermine and destroy our way of life and kill our people, okay? I understand that. And that is the one thing I can agree with the hawks out there, that's the job of the federal government, first and foremost, is to protect its citizenry. Having said that...
But, Niger, we don't want them intruding into our personal rights.
One last sentence. Having said that, it is long overdue, some 12 years later, for us to review those security measures that were put in place way back when with the Patriot Act and the Patriot Act Part 2 and subsequent acts that are similar. And it is definitely time, and this is why I applaud Rand Paul and what he's doing, and some courageous liberal Democrats as well. It is time for us to take a look at these things all over again and debate them all over again. And I think that's what a healthy, vibrant republic should be about.
Well, I'm all for protecting the citizens of our country and making sure we're all safe and secure. But I don't think it should be done at the sacrifice of our personal individual rights. And I think the level of spying, and now we have drones that are going to be overhead watching and doing the same thing, taking it to even another level potentially. And I'm not in favor of that. I think that we really have to monitor this and really pay careful attention to it, because as rights get more and more taken away, it just keeps going. Well, if we could do this, then let's do that. Oh, if we could do that, then let's do this. and it just keeps getting more heightened and heightened. And Niger, let me just say, I can relate. My office, well, let me finish this point. My office was 1 block away from 9/11, and I happened to be there as well. And let me tell you, I was there the night of. I was handing out donuts with the troopers that were brought in and law enforcement. We were handing out water and donuts and food to people. And the sight of seeing the World Trade Center just in shambles all the way to the ground, and the smoke fresh in your nose, I mean, that's a sight I'll never forget ever. And when I speak to people about it, I tell them you can never forget that. But at the same time, we don't want to be fear-mongers, and we live in a state that we're going to give up our rights that our founding fathers fought so hard for because we're living in fear. I don't think anybody wants that. But I want to get up this point for a second, because, well, I'm glad to hear that. Now, you bring up Rand Paul. How do you feel that Rand Paul, in the recent election, I think in one of the governorships in Virginia, he was supporting the Republican candidate rather than the Tea Party candidate? What do you think about that?
No. See, the Democrats did a brilliant thing. The Democrats know that there's some limited government constitutional conservatives, libertarian types, Tea Party, some would say crossover with Tea Party types, that feel that the Republican Party has disappointed them in many circumstances, and consequently either sit out elections or actually engage in third-party elections. But what you had in Virginia is you had an Obama money bungler that fueled and funded a fake, phony, fraud person that called himself a libertarian, but was not really a libertarian. But he got the libertarian line and was able to take 7 percentage points in that election. Ken Cuccinelli lost that election by 2 points. If the libertarian had not been on the